Welcome to Smart Energy, a podcast where we talk about electrification, home improvement, and clean energy. I'm your host, Andrew Zellner, Editor-in-Chief at Home Connect.
And I'm your co-host, Kelsey Bourgeois, Senior Editor here at Home Connect.
Home Connect is on a mission to rally people to change how and when they use electricity, unlocking clean, affordable, and reliable energy. You can learn more and get paid to conserve energy at homeconnect.com. Thanks for joining me, Kelsey.
Thanks for having me. So I've been thinking a lot about smart devices in the home lately. I've been learning a lot about them, and I'm curious about your thoughts. So you know that I'm a renter. I don't have control over my heat, but I am considering installing a smart thermostat anyway. Do you have one?
So I do not have a smart thermostat. I have a very stupid thermos, or furnace, not thermos.
Oh no.
So my house was built in 1906, actually in the park next to my house. Sometime in the mid-20s, late 20s, it was actually moved to where it is now.
Oh, and that's so funny.
I'm pretty sure they put this furnace in before they set the house on top of the foundation. Because it's super old. It's right next to me over here. It looks crazy. It's like a gravity furnace, which is like in Home Alone, the first one where he's in the basement and scared of the furnace.
Oh, I know it well.
That's a gravity furnace. Yeah,
you have the monster thermos. Yeah. Is what you're. We keep saying thermos. You have the monster heater.
Yes. And technology was not super advanced at that time, so essentially I just have a giant gas burner that turns on and turns off when there's a call for heat. So there's not actually any blowing or fans.
Yeah.
It just heats it's probably some combination of asbestos and other hard material. It heats this dome thing, and then the dome radiates heat upwards. Heat actually doesn't rise; it moves from hot to cold. But as long as the air around this dome is colder than the dome,
it'll move.
The heat transfers. Yeah.
Well, and if it's asbestos, you're probably going to need to when you make that switch, you'll probably need a professional to come do that. Is that right?
Yeah. There are definitely precautions you need to take. I'm in the camp that asbestos exposure, it's not good for anyone, but the folks who develop problems are ones who work with it every day.
Sure.
I think especially because housing stock in America is aging. A lot there's asbestos used in a lot of things, and folks are rightfully afraid of it. And there are precautions for working with it and removing it, but it's not like a death sentence if you accidentally
a single exposure is not a panic. Yeah. Sure, I hear you. Okay, so neither of us has smart thermostats, but I know I would like to have one, and the reason being they start to learn your routines, right? So that then you are naturally saving energy, for one thing, that they just kind of figure out when you actually need things and adjust, but also you can program them when you're not at the house, which that would be amazing to be able to do that away from home.
Mm-hmm. And I think really, when we think about smart home technology, humans are very smart. We could be doing all these things already,
Sure.
Turning the thermos down before you go to bed if you don't mind it being a little bit cooler. I always think of the Office episode where Michael, it's the one where he grills his foot on a George Foreman grill. But the idea that he sets his alarm to wake up early to plug in his Foreman grill to get the bacon going and then goes back to bed. You could do the same thing if you want your house to be warm when you actually wake up. You could set an alarm, get up, turn your thermostat up, go back to bed, then wake up, a couple hours later when your house is warm.
But that'd be so not cozy, would be the problem.
Yeah. But, so, the argument that smart thermostats are essential to saving energy, isn't really the case. What it does is it helps us lazy humans save energy sort of without having to do anything or without having to think about it.
Which is really nice because, as you said, we could change those habits, but changing habits can be tough, right? And if
Yeah.
there's something that you can buy that's, not terribly expensive, that will just automatically do it for you. I know, my upstairs neighbor, the heating in the building is different in each unit. And the upstairs neighbor has forced air, and they had a Google Nest, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that saved them so much money to install, like that paid for itself, right? So I think there's instances like that where if you know yourself and you are not going to every day be thinking all the time about what do I really need heating wise, then installing something that will do that thinking for you might be worth it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really about like using smart home devices to make your life easier and simpler.
Yes, yes,
And a smart thermostat, one that learns your habits, is definitely a good thing.
yeah.
Um, if we were located in areas where like we were using a lot of electricity for air conditioning and time of use was a bigger deal, like it is in California, you can also go deeper than just like learning habits and understand that at from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., your electricity is going to be way more expensive, almost double the price than what it is the rest of the day.
Right.
And set your smart thermostat to pre-cool your home, like cool it down lower than you normally would before 4 p.m. and then shut your AC off and let your
Yes.
temperature drift too, which I
Yeah,
think is like a really interesting use of smart technology.
it is. It is. It's that pre-cooling thing. And I think, I know we expect there to be more and more time of use plans coming to various states.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's worth all of us beginning to think about that and beginning to think about those habits, both from a money perspective and from an environmental perspective. Because the other thing is, depending on when you're using energy, depending on where you are, that energy may be from fossil fuels or it may be from renewables. And so those are things that we're all starting to learn right now and understand, hopefully. The other smart device that I have a few little smart devices. I have like Hue bulbs that I can control from my phone. And I think
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff is kind of fun because I feel like I'm in that Disney Channel movie Smart Home where my home like knows things about me.
Yep. Yep.
And the millennial in me just finds that really fun. But I also love, the Hue bulbs, but I can set them to go on for like an hour a night when I'm out of town. So it seems like someone's at home, like really simple things. Cause I'm not someone who's going to be invested in, like, I don't have cameras or, I'm not super deep on the security train, but just a little someone's home kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing makes me feel better. And to be able to, I have it set so that they turn off every night so that I don't accidentally go to bed with the lights on overnight, which is really wasteful and silly, right?
Yeah. I do think the like practical security aspects of smart devices are really interesting.
Yeah.
So I have a smart garage door opener.
Oh, how does that work?
Um, so essentially, it works just like a regular garage door opener, but it has it connects to your Wi-Fi, and there's an app, and you can use the app to open and close the garage door,
Okay.
regardless of where you are in proximity to the garage door. And the garage
Oh,
door will also tell you if it's been open for too long
I
or
see.
that sort of thing. The other really cool thing about it is that it's made by Ryobi. I'm actually not sure if they still make garage door openers, but this one was really interesting because it has a spot for a Ryobi cordless tool battery in it.
Oh,
So, and it's like super efficient. And so, if your power goes out, you can still use the garage door opener. That's
that's
like
critical.
another
That's
issue with
critical.
garage door openers is like sometimes you like that's your only entrance into the garage. You don't have
Uh-huh.
like an accessible man door.
Right.
Um, and when the power goes out, people still need to like get in and out of their garages.
Of course.
You can always like manually unlock your garage door if you have access from the inside, but it's just like another one of those convenience things that is like a peace of mind thing. And I don't think I've ever had to use it, but
No,
it's
but it's
there.
good to know. And I assume that that is some people's trepidation about adopting smart devices is, well, what about when the electricity goes out? But it seems like many of them have a plan for that. They have a
Mm-hmm.
built-in battery. They have something, I just edited the piece about smart locks, which are battery operated. Like that
Yeah.
has nothing to do. The door is not wired. But those also seem really cool, smart locks, in that, you can program things like specific codes for specific people. So, again, without having to install cameras and do a big dramatic thing, you can have access to who entered using
Mm-hmm.
what code at what time, right? Or, the author who wrote that said, if I had children, I would just do their fingerprints so that if they didn't have keys, they could just get into the house, which makes a lot of sense to me. Um,
Yeah, I smart door locks are on my radar. I'm like holding out or like trying to find the right system for one that has sort of like old looking hardware, or
sure,
like or like maybe we have something like a little more classic on our front door, and the back door we use all the time is like where we put the smart lock.
sure,
Um,
yeah.
but like my wife and I always joke about like we like leave the house to like go on a walk, or and like you don't want to carry stuff with you, so I always joke about like I think I'm going to stash my keys here, and
Yes,
like
yes.
but just knowing like you could leave the house without any keys and like come back and still be able to get in.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice. I will say my upstairs neighbors, both of them, forget their keys all the time. Once or twice a week, we get a text. Are you guys home? Luckily, we are. I work from home, but that would be nice to not have to worry about that, not get locked out of your own house. Um,
Or have like a specific code for somebody coming to watch your dog or your cat.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. My dog kind of acts as an alarm system, so he's fun that way. Um, what other smart devices? Do you have any other ones?
So I do have a whole bunch of smart plugs,
Oh, right. Yes.
and I use those in sort of like the way that I could just unplug my toaster when I'm not using it, and
Right.
stop that sort of like phantom charge. But instead, I just like have it, slated to be on for a couple hours in the morning, and then off the rest of the day, and it's just like it makes it convenient that it's like usually on when I want to use it.
Yes.
Similarly, I'm reconfiguring our like Apple TV like setup. Like right now, it's all plugged into one power strip. That also
Hmm.
includes our like internet router, and so
Sure.
I've got
That
to
needs to
separate
be on all the
those.
time. Yeah.
But like, just have our like TV stuff like turn off every night at midnight and turn back on again, probably at like 5 p.m. because we don't
Might be
really
good for all
use
of
it.
us.
Yeah,
Might
really
be
use it during the
good.
day.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I don't know how many people really know this, but TVs can be kind of big vampire
Yeah,
devices, right?
yeah,
Meaning energy devices that pull energy when they're not actually in use, right?
yeah.
So that would also include anything that has like a visual on it, right? I have my treadmill under my desk that I walk on, and I
Hmm.
unplug it in between because I move it out of the way so that I can sit. But when it's plugged in, it has a visual on the
Yeah,
thing, so it must be drawing power. If I kept it plugged in all the time, I would do a smart device,
yeah.
or a smart plug. Yeah.
So when you think about the energy usage in your home, heating and cooling is like the big one,
Right.
and the second biggest is hot water heating.
Right.
And hot water heaters historically are pretty dumb devices. Basically, you just set them at a temperature, and they're always heating up to that temperature until it
Yeah.
reaches it, and you use some water, reheats it. Newer ones that are coming on the market, especially heat pump tank water heaters,
Mhm.
have a lot more smart technology built into them.
Cool.
Um, in particular, the idea that you have an app on your phone, you can you can help your water heater like learn your family's routine of like, oh, we need hot water for a couple hours in the morning,
Uh-huh.
and then we need it again when we at night, and like maybe when you do dishes at some point.
Sure.
And you can like set your water heater to heat up to a higher temperature and then keep your water at a lower temperature
Just for the day to day.
during the day.
That makes so much sense, and I'm happy to hear it, because also you taught me something. You explained something about how water heaters work. That the way that you get that hot water is by running through all the cold water first. And so the reason what's happening when we're turning on the tap and waiting for it to turn hot, we're actually just like wasting a bunch of water in the meantime. And it sounds like this is one potential solution to shift that, or not really.
Not really. You're still gonna have your like hot water line is going to be full of like colder water
Okay.
until you open the tap, and that water is like pushed out and evacuated. The like better solution for that is to have smaller supply lines,
Okay.
especially today with like modern low flow fixtures.
Uh-huh.
But that's like a whole other like
Different
crazy water
conversation.
conservation podcast.
Well, we'll talk about that soon, I'm sure.
One of the other things folks can do, but not a lot do, is that if you're leaving your house, you can, most water heaters, both gas and electric, smart, dumb, have a temperature dial on the side, and they have something called a vacation setting
Oh,
that you can turn it to, and then that'll let that water in the tank cool. And then when you come back, you obviously have to turn it back to the temperature you want it at. Um, but that's like another way to like conserve energy.
I mean
Is like
that
thinking
should
about your hot water heater.
yeah, that should just be added to your vacation list, right? We all have the vacation list of like clean out the fridge, get rid of this, whatever. That's my big one is clean out the fridge before I leave so I don't come back to something horrible. But then turn down the water heater would should be added to that list. Yeah.
And also in like cold weather areas, some folks also like go like just like turn off the water supply to their house if they're
Mm-hmm.
concerned about like heat going out
Pipes.
and pipes freezing.
Yeah.
But I would also say that if you have never done these things before, it's probably good to do them for the first time with either like somebody who's comfortable doing them, or like a professional,
Mm-hmm.
with you or on call, especially like the idea of shutting off any water, or like messing with the settings on your hot water heater.
Yeah.
Sometimes those things like fail, but they don't fail until you move them.
Sure.
And especially the water supply to your house, you want to make sure it like works well before you like need it to work well. So like,
Absolutely.
yeah, one
That
of
would be a
the
thing to test in advance.
yeah, and one of the like regular maybe yearly maintenance things folks should do is like turn all those things once a year to make sure they work.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like checking those things just periodically is the smartest financial move because then you're not making those panicked financial decisions when the thing breaks, right? Like I
Yeah.
check testing the functionality in advance seems really smart. Um, anyway,
And so I also have a smart plug on my refrigerator. Uh,
right.
and during events it powers off for an hour or 2 hours, and like you just have to remember not to open the refrigerator, or even if you do, it's not a big deal. Like
Just don't
I'm
open
like,
it like 20 times,
yeah,
probably.
yeah, like the first time you open it and you notice the light's not on, just like close it again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I have my smart plug. I've had it on my window AC unit for the last few months. It's cold enough now. I took it out,
Yeah.
but for events, it just naturally stopped going and it was fine. It
Mm-hmm.
was no big deal. I have a nice fan. It's totally fine. So,
Very cool. So thinking about smart approaches to technology and smart devices and sustainable habits, I had a conversation this week with Nirmit Prabhakar, who does research in sustainable aviation,
cool.
and it was fascinating. And it's like an area of research where we likely won't see the effects of it for a decade, but he's right on the leading edge.
I
Uh,
mean, that's great. I'm just happy to hear. I mean, like I could have thought about it for 10 seconds and realized,
yeah,
of course, people are studying this, but I hadn't heard a lot about it. Like you said, it's not really relevant to consumers at our level yet, but I'm excited to hear what's going on for the future since I know
yeah,
that's such a big thing.
and especially like thinking about like making an EV, an electric vehicle on the ground work. You can just put a big battery in, and like it doesn't matter how much it weighs.
Right.
I mean, it matters, but like,
Not
but
in
you're
the
not
same way
trying to
it
like
matters in the sky.
putting it into the air. So
Right,
yeah.
right.
So you definitely want to tune in for that. Our guest today is Nirmit Prabhakar. He's a researcher in the clean aviation space doing some really fascinating work. Thanks for joining me, Nirmit.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
So can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing and kind of your background?
Yeah, sure. So I have 3 degrees in aerospace engineering, both all my undergrad, my master's, and a PhD. Um, I have worked in this field, in the aerospace industry, for after my graduation for 5 years now. I work at Argonne National Laboratory, which is a national lab where we do a lot of clean energy research. My research in particular is focused on aviation sustainability. And so my job is to look at new technologies and evaluate the impact that they might have on getting to a more sustainable aviation. And with the current targets, we want to achieve carbon net neutrality, at least neutrality by 2050. And we have avenues for all other modes of transportation and other sectors of energy where we know what we need to do, right?
Yeah.
We know we need to electrify things. We know we need to get to renewable sources. But aviation is already at the forefront of technology, right?
Right.
And to transform something which is already at the top requires a level of research and dedication that hasn't been present in the past. And so now, essentially, when we are like, oh shit, is when we are really, poised and looking into this problem. And so I'm developing mathematical models that can simulate aircraft and how much energy they use from point A to point B for many different variety of aircraft. So think anything from fixed wing to drones to air taxis, all platforms, regardless of how they work, as long as they fly, we can study them essentially with mathematical modeling.
Very, very interesting. So, like thinking kind of more generally, like what are some of the avenues to cleaning up aviation?
So the government has come up with a roadmap, and they're placing a lot of their bets on something called sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs in short. These are just like jet aviation fuel or jet A or jet fuel as we would refer to it. But the avenue of production of these fuels is less carbon intensive. So these are made out of plants and organic materials. Corn is a big thing that we use a lot to make sustainable aviation fuels. So the carbon impact of the fuel itself is lower than what it would be for a normal jet aviation fuel. And so the best thing about using sustainable aviation fuels is that we don't have to change technology. We don't have to change our fleet, our current fleet, to be able to adopt sustainable aviation fuels. And what that does is it gives us the opportunity to start seeing differences very soon. Now, there are a lot of promises of SAF, and those promises aren't really validated yet because when we talk about greenhouse gas impacts, right, it's a life cycle impact that we talk about, right? So in our research, what we do when we analyze or when we quantify impact is not just when we are making that flight from point A to point B, right? We go back to like, how is the fuel, what fuel are we using? How is the fuel that we use? What is the carbon impact of production of that fuel? What is the carbon impact of the aircraft itself? What, let's say we're using, any aircraft, like what is the life cycle impact of producing that aircraft? What will be the impact of recycling that aircraft once its life cycle is done? And so we look at a wide range of greenhouse gas impact, and when we start looking and analyzing SAFs in that category, so like talking about how much carbon is actually being used, there is still some debate in research as to how big an impact we can eventually make. It's still very early. It's still a lot of research. So everything is a little bit cloudy, a little bit muddy, but that's just what research is, right? So we dig tiny holes to see some clarity and expand on what we found. In addition, we are also looking at all different avenues that you would see in other markets like electrification, hybridization, uh, fuel cells. So hydrogen fuel cells is a very big
Mm-hmm.
thrust. So hydrogen actually, one of the differences between the American roadmap and the European roadmap towards sustainability is the American lack of using hydrogen as a viable source. Airbus and EASA, which is the aviation authority in Europe, has really placed their bets on hydrogen. And so they're really going for it there in that avenue. The only thing that will not work out in the immediate future is electrification, where we will see that battery technology is currently not at that level with either producing enough power.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are thinking of aircraft and aviation, we are thinking of megawatt scale power generation, which is not something the batteries and the power electronics are capable of doing yet. And even when they are, the batteries are just too heavy
Yeah.
because the limiting factor in aviation is weight, right? And jet aviation fuel has like 200% more energy density than what a battery can provide. And so that's
Interesting.
not
Yeah.
comparable. But electrification of aviation gives us much better efficiency in terms of powertrain. We talk about jet aviation fuel and how it has so much more power per kilogram or per volume, but it's very inefficient to burn it and extract energy from it. So we are looking at about 20 to 40%, right? So that's the range that we're looking at. However, if you're using batteries, you can get your whole powertrain to be 90% efficient,
Right.
right? The issue comes with weight. As long as batteries cannot get lighter while providing the same amount of energy, it will be very hard to use them for larger transportation systems. Anything from like ships or aviation in particular because of the weight dependency, but even for other things that require really high amounts of power and energy, they're not going to be a viable system. So we do look at hybridization as a possible avenue, but electrification would be very limited to shorter range aircraft where you're only going like 200, 300 miles.
Um, is nuclear power part of the conversation?
Uh, no, no. Again, safety.
Sure.
The nuclear energy, even though it's very reliable, we've been doing it for a while. It's still not scaled down enough, so we still require a lot of infrastructure around a nuclear reactor, which is not possible in an aircraft. Safety concerns also remain.
Mm-hmm.
There are there's a lot of actual research going into something called SMEs, small SMRs, small modular reactors, which is essentially what it sounds like. You would have very small nuclear reactors, which can be scaled by adding more to generate the amount of power that you can. But that's not something that has been tested or is viable right now to be tested in an aircraft.
So you mentioned in Europe, Airbus is funding research, maybe, or doing
Yes,
research.
it is
Um,
funding research.
is who's investing in this technology, or who's funding it in the United States?
The government mostly. So when you're thinking about these technologies, I want you to remember that this is not something that's coming out right now. The government is investing in breakthrough and groundbreaking technologies where they put out these funding opportunities for people to start working on groundbreaking technology. So right now, there's going to be an ARPA-E, so which is like the Department of Energy groundbreaking technology funds. Um, they're they're currently giving out a lot of money for people that can do 1 kilowatt hour per kilogram battery specific energy.
Okay.
And so that's a big thing where they're like, okay, we want you to work on this. Show us you have a proof of concept and we will give you more money to develop this. And so this is looking 15 years in the future and starting now to get to technological levels or technological innovation in a way where at some point in time we will have that. So everything that I'm talking about, you won't see implemented for at least 10 years, right? And so aviation by inheritance, is very safety driven, and any change in aviation is very slow because it has to go through so many different levels of essentially validation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have to validate that this system as an aircraft has a failure rate of 1 in 10 to the power 9. So every 10 to the power 9 operations of the system, you can fail one time. And so to get to that level of safety and to get to that level of essentially saying that this is safe, it requires a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of testing, right? And that's very expensive. So
So thinking thinking of so at Ohm Connect we're very like driven by sort of like changing people's habits. In when I think about aviation, it's like fuel and power are key components. Um, but then I think of like an electric car where like the most efficient speed is sometimes slower than people want to drive. Are you doing any research into changing habits or expectations?
as uh, as scientists, that's not really something that I can model mathematically,
Oh,
but
sure.
that will
Yeah.
be something that drives change. Uh, by nature, having electric and hybridized powertrains, or even hydrogen powertrains, they will all be electric and will be using propellers essentially to generate thrust, and won't be as fast as what like the aircrafts we see now. So there is going to be some level of change that has to be accepted, and at some point, I feel there will be enough incentive to people when they see things that are happening around us to change behaviors. I really do hope so. Um, the yeah, that's basically what it
it,
boils
it
down
is
to.
it is hard to model people for sure.
Yeah, it is very hard to
Um,
model people.
I also think about having spent some time in Europe. Like in the United States, like the only viable means of moving long distances is through air travel. Like we do have trains, we do have Amtrak. The like time trade off is much different. But I
Yeah,
think maybe it was France like outlawed short haul
short
flights.
haul flights. Yeah, Norway is
Um,
doing all electrified by 2035. So
uh,
there's a lot of push going towards that. Honestly, I believe that as long as sustainability, like solutions, at least for transportation, are pitched as individual solutions, when I say individual solutions, I mean like hybridizing individual mode of transportation. It will like if sustainability is looked at from a point of view of making individual transport more efficient, we will never achieve what we want to achieve. Sustainability will only work when we move away from the model of individual transportation to public transportation. That's that's the way. That's the only way to achieve where we want to be. but that will take such a major shift in urban development, urban planning, just changing mindsets of people that are so dependent on cars. And,
Mm-hmm.
in America and in the US, in general, a world without cars is not even imaginable, right? Can you imagine not like a world or a city where there is no requirement for a car, right? Or just not having one. Like here, maybe, yeah, in Chicago, I know people
Mm-hmm.
that don't have it, but go just outside, right? And that's
Yeah.
it. Like that's all where you need to be is 20 miles outside Chicago. And imagine there is no way you would be able to make it, right? And then you think about electrifying all those cars. Like, yeah, and there are impacts that we're not thinking of right now. Uh, Particularly, let's think about an example. When we're thinking about electrifying cars, the new cars that would have batteries will be much heavier
Mm-hmm.
than our conventional engine powered cars. And it is, proven research that heavier trucks, heavier cars, like SUVs, they degrade roads faster, right? Concrete, very high carbon impact, very
Mm-hmm.
high, like one of the highest, right? All that repaving of the roads that we're electrifying,
Right.
again, it's a cycle, and unless we're moving away from that individualization of technology to making it more public and having those avenues and changing that mindset, it will be a very difficult thing to achieve.
So I think one data point that like all researchers are interested in is sort of that like April 1st, 2020, everyone is staying at home. Like air travel essentially stops. Um, I think it proved to a lot of people that like the habits we were in could change when there's like this societal push to change them, even if for an emergency. Is there anything in the aviation space that was learned like from that stop and sort of like restart?
I It was a difficult time for the industry in general because,
Mm-hmm.
but I not in terms of technology. No, I think we really figured out mostly like how important and critical aviation is in our
Supply chain and
yeah,
yeah.
the supply chain in general is we're so dependent on it that uh I don't have the exact data point, but there were so many aircrafts which during that time were repurposed into cargo airplanes because it was so lucrative, right? It was such a great business model to just change them and do that. And once we are also taking all of these goods and transporting them through airplanes, that, as, as demand grows, that also grows the carbon impact of all our freight.
So being someone in the aviation space and doing this research, do you like analyze your own carbon footprint? Do you avoid flying even though it's probably like something you like doing, or
I do. I enjoy airplanes very, very much. I have been obsessed with them since I was 6 years old. And I've always known what I want to do
Mhm.
with my life because of my obsession with airplanes. And so it um I feel that it is unfair to people, like individual people, to to talk about to talk about individual people and their impact on the environment,
Mhm.
because that's not a great place to either have a metric or start a discussion, right? This should always be a top-down discussion. Yes, there are things that we can do better, but those are very little things. They're not making a difference, right? The differences are made at the top, and by the time things get to us, we have very little opinion or effect,
Hmm.
right? As individuals, we can always do better. We can, um, get smart thermostats and apply eco modes in them, and we can limit our use of heat and air conditioning where we can. We can try to take public transportation as much as we want, and bike everywhere in Chicago. It's great.
Yeah.
That's what I do, and you avoid traffic, which is also great. Um, but to pin down things on yourself is one, very stressful in everyday life, and two, unfair.
Yeah.
And so I do analyze my carbon footprint. I do take a lot of steps, which might seem weird to people. Like I never use paper towels. Like in my house, we have no paper towels. We only have reusable towels, which we wash every week, and
Hmm.
and we clean with them. We use them as paper towels. It's sustainable. We don't have to buy them, 5 times a year, and small things we
Yeah.
can do with small changes in our lives, I will do, because that's important, and I'm contributing, and that makes me feel good. But it doesn't have a big impact.
Yeah. Um, so kind of like the last thing uh, I wanted to ask you about was really, you mentioned like how slow the industry is to change, and talked a little bit about we have like people traveling and we have goods traveling, um, and the idea of this like top down thing. So like, do you foresee a future where only people are allowed to fly and goods aren't, or is there any like hint at like regulation either? I think the United States is going to be very slow to adopt any regulation, but the idea that like short haul flights in Europe are like being scrutinized is, do you see any of that sort of thing happening stateside?
Eventually, yes, I do see that. I would envision that things will need to change. And in addition, there's going to be new technologies, right? So you
Hmm.
can't discount the act of having newer technologies and things that we didn't think of before, like airships, right? Airships after the Hindenburg
Yeah.
were basically obsolete, but now they're making a comeback, right? So people are thinking about using airships as cargo ships.
Mm.
So over the Atlantic, you would just have these airships carry cargo faster than ships, and so much more environmentally friendly, because you don't really use that much energy, because all the hydrogen. There are going to be thoughts about it, but it's going to be much cleaner an option, and so there is going to be innovation, and so thinking about all of those things in terms of just um, or bringing regulations to curb something is not as helpful as opposed to making regulations that avoid the things, but also trying to find new avenues to make
Hmm.
or to change how we are doing current things. And that's essentially what we are trying to do now, is trying to make regulations to avoid impacting the climate more, while still being able to work on and create and modify current and new technologies to be to make us more sustainable.
I think that that's a great point too. Is that there's not one thing we're going to do that solves this. It's all
Hmm.
the things we're doing
Yeah,
to solve
yeah.
this.
That's always going to be, well, like, it's not, there is not going to be a single solution, and we've seen this, especially with aviation. I published a paper a couple of years ago where we analyzed some benchmarks in terms of electrification. And in the paper, instead of saying, you know, this is what we need to do, we were looking at, okay, for this impact, this is where we need to be in terms of technology. And we found that even at like 1500 kilowatt hours per kilogram of battery specific energy, which is about 5 times what it is right now, we're at about 300. We will only see about 25% of passenger miles in the domestic United States that is able to be replaced by electrified aircraft, which is, it's okay, like it's significant, but if you think about it, you'll have to change your whole fleet of aircraft to only get 25% of what we are currently flying.
It's like kind of trying to repair your car while it's running at 60 miles an hour down the highway. Interesting. Cool. Well, Nirmit, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks want to learn more about clean aviation, where should they look?
It's a good question. There isn't really a singular resource that is doing this or like compiling results, and because it's still something that is gaining traction. But ask me in a year, and I will tell you a better answer.
At the end of each episode, we answer a listener question. Today, our listener question is from Lily. So Lily wants to know, do I need a professional to do a home energy audit, or are there things I can and should do myself? So as a home energy audit, she's referring to this idea of auditing your home, seeing where things are escaping, air is escaping one way or the other, things are inefficient, that sort of thing, right? So I have some answers to this, but I'm interested in your thoughts, Andrew.
So by no means do you need to hire a professional to come into your home and tell you like what's not working.
Okay.
The things like a professional home energy auditor are looking for are things anyone with like a little bit of knowledge about a home can also see.
Okay.
The big push in home energy audits are air sealing and insulation. Air sealing is something that like takes a little bit more detective work, and insulation is something like you can visually verify. And so there are a few things you want to think about. First of all, you want to determine what sort of insulation you have. I probably start in your attic, and then based on what sort of insulation that is, like how deep that insulation is, will like give you its R value, its insulation value, and different parts of the country are supposed to have different amounts in their attic.
And you can look that up online. What insulation should I have based on where I live? Okay.
Yeah. And the general rule of thumb is that like if you're going to improve insulation anywhere in your house, because of the way homes work, focusing on the attic gives you like the biggest return for your investment.
Okay. So starting in your attic. Mm-hmm. And then I also know, as you said, you don't need a professional auditor, but what I'll add is for some of the things that you can get in the IRA and the Inflation Reduction Act, you will need a professional audit to start some of those processes. So that would be the case in which we might recommend going that route. There is a tax credit available right now of up to $150 to get a professional to come in and do that audit. And that's something you can do right now to prepare for bigger tax credits and rebates that you're going to be able to get next year.
Yeah. And I'll also say like utilities often provide discounts on energy auditing services too.
Okay.
And so through the combination of finding a program through your utility and the Inflation Reduction Act credits, you can get, pretty close to free for an energy audit. A good energy audit will also utilize something called a blower door.
Okay.
Which they call it the red door of truth, but it's usually a red door with a fan in it, and it pressurizes your house to simulate, I want to say it's like 20 mile per hour winds outside.
Okay.
And so with like that pressurization, it sort of shows the weak spots in your home's building envelope, specifically around air sealing.
Okay.
And so like usually the house will be pressurized, and then somebody will walk around with a little smoke stick. Like back in the day, it would have been just like a dude walking around with like a cigarette. But like if a homeowner wants to sort of like understand where their air leaks are in their house, you can, on a windy day, walk around with like some incense, and you will see where air is being sucked out of your house. It's usually around doors and windows, usually sort of where any kind of planes meet. So like sometimes in corners, especially like lower corners by like baseboards, and then at your ceiling, anywhere you have like a penetration through the ceiling. So like if you have a light and above that light is the attic, likely air is escaping up into the attic through the light fixture.
Okay, so that's a really good DIY tip. So, you might do this professional thing for getting these rebates, and that's great. But it sounds like there are quite a few things you can start on your own and start to adjust on your own, because I know there's some insulation you can also do yourself or do for relatively cheaply. Yeah. The air sealing, replacing windows can be really expensive, but you and I talked about adding like the plastic over my windows, or I often add like weather stripping around things like that. Those would also be steps in the right direction that someone could take, right?
Yeah. That specifically air sealing is like keeping all of your conditioned air in is like half the battle. Right. And then insulation is that other half of the battle.
Okay. So Lily, I hope that helps. There's a few things that you can do yourself, and there's also some resources available for you to get cheap, potentially even all the way free, professional audits as you prepare for potentially some bigger choices, right? The big thing that I think we want to communicate is that it is worth doing some sort of audit rather than jumping right into home improvement projects, because each home is different and you want to be sure that you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. So where are you the least energy efficient? Where is it going to lower your bill the most, for example, to improve it?
Well, that's it for this episode of Smart Energy. Special thanks to Kelsey for joining me, our guest Nirmit Prabhakar for the great interview, and Lily for sending in a question, and of course, all of you for listening. To see the show notes, send feedback, and learn more about Smart Energy, visit ohmconnect.com/smartenergy. Stay safe, conserve some energy, and we'll see you next time.